where they're like, that really gave me a boner, if you know what I mean, that type of thing. It's like not really a double entendre, man.
Welcome to Gold, Diamonds, and Death, a James Bond podcast. I am your 00 host, Jonathan Watkins. I am a writer for all things under the Cinemasins brand name and a co-host of Behind the Scenes podcast. Joining me each and every week for this endeavor is the man that some people call the Robert Shaw of podcasting. He's the co-founder of Cinemasins, co-host of the weekly podcast Recotopia. One of my good friends, Mr. Chris Atkinson. How are you doing, my friend?
Hello, I am doing all right. Yes, doing well.
Are you... After watching this movie, we're going to talk about from Russia with Love, obviously because it's the second James Bond film, second Connery film, and I was just curious: have you ever ridden a train?
Yes, I have.
Because I don't think I have. At least not overnight. Like I took a train from Chicago to like a casino one time. Mm-hmm. I guess that counts. But
was France to Spain? I took a train.
Oh wow.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So did you actually have like a cabin?
Yeah.
Or did you have to just?
It was me and two, maybe three. It was probably two other people because it was a senior trip in high school. So so it was me and a couple other people. I don't think I slept very well during that whole thing, but it was an overnight train trip from France to Spain. So.
Yeah, I was thinking about sharing one of those compartments with my wife and daughter. And just being I'd we'd have to get my daughter her own. I think that'd be too many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But then I also heard because my brother-in-law, my wife's brother, he does not like to fly. He just really doesn't like to fly. So he's taken a lot of trains if it's doable instead. He'll
Yeah.
And he talks about how you can get a suite or a cabin or whatever they call it. But if you don't want to pay that much, if you want to pay less, there actually is a main compartment. I guess it would kind of be on an airplane, if you were in coach.
Yeah.
But I think I would have to fork over the money for a cabin. I guess sometimes the cabins are taken though, because I don't know how many are on a train. I just know nothing about trains.
I really have no idea.
So,
only thing I know is I've ridden one once. So that's all.
Well, you know more than me. Mm-hmm. So that's the important thing. So can you tell me? Was narrow margin an accurate prediction?
Yes.
Was the commuter?
Mm-hmm. Think about all the train movies. They're all like that. Yeah, they're all.
I guess the commuter's a subway, but that's kind of it's like an L train. That's a train, isn't it?
Yeah, the L train is. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I got us way off topic, but you're doing well. Mm-hmm. We both watched From Russia with Love this week, and we're going to be talking about From Russia with Love. So I guess let's go ahead and get into this. So our first segment is something we like to call Eon Flux.
This is a journey.
I'm gonna make a movie!
We have to go back, Kate.
Wow, how did you know all that stuff?
I did my research.
I don't understand any of this.
What the fuck is going on?
We are going to scour through the history of Eon Productions and give you all the highs and lows that went into the makings of these films. So I'm really confused about everything says this was made because Dr. No was a success. But I will say at the end of Dr. No, though, it says James Bond will return in From Russia with Love. So I guess if it wasn't a hit, we just never would have gotten this movie.
Now, here's something, and I could be wrong about this. I read some trivia on From Russia with Love after this, and it said this was the first time that it had shown up. Now, this is the first time that it said James Bond will return. I'm wondering if after the success of the James Bond movies, they went back to Dr. No and added the James Bond will return there.
Maybe.
So that's a possibility. But it also could be, some weird thing that people forgot to time, that, they were going to make this next movie anyway. Well, and especially since, and I'm sure you'll get, this is another one of those trivia things. John F. Kennedy in 1961 put it in his top 10 of books that the Ian Fleming novel was in his top 10 that year. in 1961. So like the Broccoli and the other producer, Saltzman, right? Were already ecstatic in 1961 about From Russia with Love making that list. And so who knows? Maybe they forgot that they were making this anyway.
Yeah, I've got a few things on that. I want to say real quick, because I forgot to do this last week too at the top, and I need to do this now just so people get their credit. I do get some of this just from Googling and finding places online, but I have been reading the book, Nobody Does It Better, The Complete, Uncensored, Unauthorized Oral History of James Bond. That is a book that you can buy on Amazon for, electronically or however you like to get your books, but highly recommend that if you're interested in reading about, a lot of in-depth stuff on the makings of these films. The JFK thing. So, other interesting fact is that From Russia with Love was the last film he watched in the White House before going to Dallas.
Yeah.
That is
insane, right?
So creepy. I mean, I guess if it had been any movie, we'd still be talking about it that way, but it was just, I don't know, for some reason it being that, and that he was so associated with this novel, which I find interesting. I love the idea that we had presidents that were associated with like reading novels, like fun novels. Like you would never hear that today.
Probably not.
Or people would complain about it. They'd be like, you don't have time to read a book. Work on the country.
Yeah.
Not realizing that they watch movies all the time at the White House. But somebody in the book, and I didn't write down who it was, but somebody said in the book that I was reading that he did say that, and his endorsement actually initially it sparked the publishing company, which was Signet, to redesign their Bond titles and start releasing them in a uniform style. So the books, essentially the books became more popular again, even though they were already kind of popular. But I guess they just they even went bigger with that, and then. And they were definitely capitalizing off the endorsement, because even after all this happened, they still were trying to get Thunderball made. Like that was still their intention. And when they still had to, there's a lot to do with Thunderball that we'll talk about when we get to that. But so they eventually had to settle on this. And then so it was From Russia with Love was the one they picked. And they basically just said, for the most part, like that book they said it had like all the scenic stuff, like, and the fighting, and it was just something about the way the book was written that they just decided that was the best one to do next. This, because of Dr. No's popularity, the budget on this was increased by $1 million. So it was a $2 million budget. It, however, ended up costing, I don't know how much more than that, but they went over budget quite a bit, apparently. And then, I don't know why they reported this, but Connery, if anybody's interested, Connery got a $100,000 bonus to go along with a salary of $54,000. $54,000 is a lot of money, I'm sure, in 1964, but it's still crazy to think, the way actors are making money today, it's just, crazy to think that Connery just got paid. I hate to say just got paid $154,000. I would do a movie now for $154,000. But
yeah, no kidding.
So it was released in the UK October 10th, 1963. Same kind of like what Dr. No did. It released later in the US. We got it May 27th, 1964, which actually became one of the few years where the US got 2 Bond movies because Goldfinger comes out at the end of the year.
Yeah, they were already making Goldfinger at the time that it came out in the U.S.
Yeah, it is crazy. It's insane too, just how quickly they filmed these. I mean, if you think about there was a time period where we got a Bond movie like every other year, like 70s and 80s. And then I guess even with Brosnan, it was probably every 2 or 3 years. Craig, for various reasons, has been kind of spread out a lot more. But I still can't believe how quickly they were making these movies, because these couldn't have been like, these weren't like just, I mean, they had to go to different locations and they had to build sets at Pinewood, and, they had to do all this stuff. And
yeah. Well, and especially in this one where they have that huge chess tournament thing at the beginning. That's, $150,000 set, and,
it's crazy.
They had to make a matte painting for the rooftop and everything. Everything else is something they had to build. It was amazing, like just amazing stuff.
Oh, it is. And we can definitely talk about visually, this movie is awesome. Oh, but I was just saying, it's no wonder to me that Connery got burnt out, because I think the one thing that's interesting about this movie, and probably at least Goldfinger, is these first few movies, like Connery really looks like he's having fun. And like, if you read about his offset stuff too, it seems like he was really into it, because they were saying he was always there first in the morning. If there was like a 10 a.m. call, he'd be there at 7:30, And it's just going to be funny when we start talking about a couple of his later ones where he seems less interested.
Well, yeah, obviously, right? Because you're not living the life of James Bond, really, right?
No.
You're making a movie, and those things take its toll, especially when you're making the same. It's not the same movie, but it's the same kind of movie and the same character over and over and over again. And I'm sure at the beginning where he was, he got this recognition, he became famous, all of that. I'm sure that was a huge thing, that gave him a lot of motivation at first. But once you get that, you're not like the starving artist anymore after a while, and you're just like, I want to do something different. So I totally understand why he started to feel that way.
Like TV shows, like procedurals that go like Law and Order,
no kidding.
like SVU, and Mariska Hargitay, she might be like one of the best actors ever because I mean she's made it through 20 plus seasons of this show that is the exact same show every week. And as far as I know, I haven't watched it in a long time, but as far as I know, she's still really good. I mean, because I think at some point you're just bored, right? You're just like, I'm just doing the same crap over and over.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Terrence Young returns. He was the director of Dr. No as well. This is his second of 3 Bond films, so we will be talking about him again in a couple weeks. Richard Maybaum and Joanna Harwood were brought back as writers, although I did see where Lynn Dayton, who's a novelist, was hired and just, I guess, didn't cut it.
Yeah.
Couldn't get the script to work.
Definitely had to rewrite this.
They brought Maybaum and Harwood. I believe this is Harwood's last credit, but Maybaum's got quite a few more to go. So we'll be talking about him. But yeah, Lynn Dayton, interestingly enough, though, I haven't read the novels. I do actually own them. They're on this bookcase back here because I got them at a used bookstore a couple years ago. But he wrote I think it's Harry Palmer. It's something like that. But it was the Ipcris File was the first book, and they made that into a movie with Michael Caine, and I think they made 2 or 3 sequels to it. So it's just interesting that he couldn't write this, but he wrote books that were spy novels that ended up becoming also like pretty, famous movies. But I think they're well known to people that are fans of stuff like that. The film made around 20 million more than Dr. No. It was about 79 million worldwide. And I would say general consensus, at least now, is that this is one of the high points of the franchise. I was actually surprised to see that a lot of critics were kind of just called it like mediocre. Like they just thought it was okay. And there's quite a few that even said it wasn't as good as Dr. No, which I just found
that's weird.
I found fascinating.
I can see why if you're like someone who really likes enigmatic villains and stuff like that, you may have knocked this down a tick. And there's probably another. We'll get into the one section that I think really kind of drags this movie down a little bit, even though I still think this is way better than Dr. No. But
it is.
We'll talk a little bit about that later. But if you're looking for like a big Spectre villain in this. The villains are like okay, basically. There's not like one. Yeah. There's not somebody who's like super powerful and behind it all, really. In this,
you end up basically getting like 3 henchmen, or 2 henchmen and 1 henchwoman. I guess it's but yeah, in the 80s, like in 1986, Danny Perry, who's a critic that's written a lot of books. People might know him if he wrote they were popular in the 80s. I don't know if people still talk. I think I've heard him on some podcasts, but he wrote these series of books about cult films, which is pretty good. But in his 1986 book, he described From Russia with Love as an excellent, surprisingly tough and gritty James Bond film, which is refreshingly free of the gimmicky that would characterize the later Bond films. And Connery and Bianchi play real people. We worry about them and hope their relationship will work out. Shaw and Lot Linya are splendid villains. Both have exciting, well-choreographed fights with Connery. Actors play it straight with excellent results. Oh, that's a pretty good way to sum that movie up. 2004, Total Film Magazine named it the 9th best British film of all time.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy. And then also, this was the first film to win a BAFTA. It won for best cinematography. So we talked about the writers, director. Obviously, Connery's back. But we also have Bernard Lee is back as M. Lois Maxwell is back as Moneypenny. They're not going to be going anywhere for a minute.
Yeah.
We also get the second and, unfortunately, I guess, final appearance of Eunice Grayson as Sylvia. Poor Sylvia.
Yeah.
She was supposed to be like in 5. We talked about this in the Dr. No episode, but I just think it's crazy. She signed a contract and all of a sudden I can't remember who directs Goldfinger, but I guess we'll talk about that next week. But he was just like, I don't want her to be in this movie. Desmond Llewellyn is in this. It's his first appearance. He's not given the name Q in this movie, and he's not given any name. And then in the credits, he's listed as Boothroyd, which was actually the name of the character from the first movie.
It was Guy Hamilton, by the way, did Goldfinger.
Huh?
Guy Hamilton did Goldfinger.
That's right. Yeah, Guy Hamilton. It was on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah,
man. A lot of these like sound the same to me. Like Guy Hamilton, Terrence Young,
pretty much.
Martin Campbell.
Yeah, they're all the same. Same name. Yeah.
This is also our first appearance, sort of Blofeld.
Yeah.
We only hear the voice of, and he's actually credited with a question mark, which I thought was interesting.
Right. And there's you have a guy who played in Dr. No, who's playing the hands.
It's Anthony Dawson.
Yeah, playing the hands and petting the cat, and then you have a voice that's I can't remember his name either, but he almost sounds.
I thought the voice was Anthony Dawson's. Was it not the same guy?
It's not the same voice.
Oh, okay. I wrote that down
he
wrong.
sounds like Sean Connery, so I thought that they had done Sean Connery there for a second. But no, it was some other dude who did the voice on that. So
Anthony Dawson, he was the professor that Bond I guess kills at that house in Jamaica or whatever. But in Dr. No, the thing I always remember him from, though, he's the guy that Ray Milland, or however you say his last name, blackmails to kill Grace Kelly and Dial M for Murder. I just always picture him like with those scissors. And
yeah.
That's how I see that guy. But anyways, other people in the cast, we've got Daniela Bianchi, who was the 1960 Miss Universe runner-up. How was she the runner-up?
I know, right? From Italy, yeah.
She plays Tatiana. And she was not the first choice.
Yeah, she was. I think she even tried out to be in Dr. No as well, and ended up in this one. So.
Yeah, and she was not the first choice, and I didn't really recognize any of the other actresses. They were all like Italian. But I will say one story I read, which was really disturbing. This actress named Elga Gemba Anderson. She had the role. She accepted the role. But then she refused to have sex with the UA exec, so she was fired. That's the rumor. I don't know.
Well, you know what?
I saw it in a few different places.
Looking back in the era in which this is filmed, I'm not entirely surprised, and considering the stories that people tell with a kind of an unnerving, I don't know, like aw shucks, no big deal, whatever, like what they were talking about with Ursula Andress when they were tanning her up, and there were like 10 people showing up with breakfasts and stuff like that, and she was just like, oh, boys will be boys and whatever. But like even stuff with Terrence Young, like I hear stuff where like everybody's like, boy, I loved working with this guy, but then there'd be stuff like where, and this is a random thing from this movie, and this is just a trivia note, and it may not, who knows how true it is, but like one of the things that it was that he didn't like her legs, the Gabriella, what's her name? Daniela Bianchi's legs in the scene where they're looking through the periscope or whatever. So she hired some other woman to have to walk into the scene. So, there's like little things like that there's definitely a ton of sexism going on at this time. And of course it's a different time, but who knows if that story is true, but
and that's what I'm definitely categorizing it as a rumor, but I read it in a few different places. So I thought I'd at least mention it. Pedro Armendariz, I'm going to go with. He plays Karam Bey, which kind of ends up being...
It's Armendaris.
Thank you. He plays the character Karam Bey. This is kind of like a character, kind of like in Dr. No, we had the guy in Jamaica that kind of befriends Bond and kind of becomes like his little, like his sidekick or whatever.
To never be a Bond friend in a movie, by the way.
Yeah, it's like they're like the red shirts. I don't know how often this really happens, because like I don't think it happens in Goldfinger, but there might be something I'm forgetting. But this was at least the first couple films. They did this thing. He was actually cast on the recommendation of John Ford. John Ford and Terrence Young apparently knew each other. And then the sad thing about him, though, he was in really poor health. He was like just dying from like apparently a horrible cancer diagnosis. I don't know where he had cancer.
Yeah.
But because he needed to get more financial freedom for his wife before he died, he was a trooper.
And
they finished the movie.
They actually rearranged the schedule so that all of his scenes would get shot early on in the thing. And yes, he has a tragic end. I don't want to get too heavily into the weeds, but if you want to look up Pedro Armendariz and what happened after the movie and everything, it's a tragic end. It's sad because he's really good in this movie.
Yeah, that's why I didn't mention the specifics of what happens after. But for sure, no, if you're interested at all, look that up. But yeah, and it was cool too that they kept him on. That feels like. I don't know how much insurance and stuff played into anything back then, but that seems like something today where they couldn't even hire the person because they would be dealing with too much. I don't know if that would make you liable, you know.
Yeah,
but I don't
apparently
know.
they had to stand him up a couple of times during scenes.
Yeah. So it's kind of I like that at least he got to do.
And
something,
he's so good in it though. He's so oh my god, he's so good. He's one of the best side characters I've ever seen.
He's probably the one I'm sad wasn't recurring.
Yeah,
I would have we have to get freaking, which I can't wait till we talk about Joe Bob or whatever that character's name is, and the couple of Roger Moore films.
Yep.
But yeah, this was actually a guy I would have loved to have seen come back. We can definitely talk about him some more in the thing. Let me just Joe Robinson was originally considered to play Grant. Not really sure who that is, but that I saw that mentioned a few times. Robert Shaw got the role, though, of course. He plays, I guess, the main villain. Although, like we said earlier, there's kind of at least it feels like two villains in this.
Yeah.
That's if you're not counting Blofeld and you're not counting Kromstein. I don't know how to say her first name. It's Lotte. Lotte.
Yeah, I actually heard this name pronounced several times, but I don't remember if it's exact, but it's Lotte Lenya, I think.
Okay, Lotte Lenya. That makes sense. Yeah. She plays Kleb, who is another really fun character in this movie.
Yep.
She was nominated for an Academy Award a couple years earlier.
If there was any model for what would become the Austin Powers, this is her. Yeah. Absolutely.
No, I thought about that right when I saw that. It was the Francesca or whatever. I can't remember that character's name in Austin Powers.
Yeah, I can't either. But definitely modeled off of that.
Yeah, but she's a great actress, and like I said, she was nominated for Academy Award a couple years before this in a movie called The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone. And then our kind of third henchman, I guess, he has a lot more to do in the novel than he does in the movie, but Vladek Scheibal plays Kronstein. And he we'll be talking about him again in a couple weeks, I found out, when we do the 1967 Casino Royale. He's in that. So here's just a few just interesting things I found. Connery apparently was considered, I don't know what they considered overweight, but Terrence Young, by the way, is interviewed in this book that I'm reading. And so I get a lot of stuff from him in these first couple of movies, and he seems like he's very blunt. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
Because he just flat out says, he's like, when they were shooting the scene where Connery walks into the room and Tatiana's in the bed and Connery's just wearing a towel, he said they had to keep reshooting that scene because he had to keep making Connery hold his breath longer so his chest would come in because he had too much of a tummy, is what Terrence Young's saying. I'm just like, holy crap. That definitely, I didn't realize how crazy that could get with dudes too. But yeah. If he's overweight, I'm obese. So,
I will say this for Terrence Young, and you may be getting to this, and I'm sorry to step on it if I am.
Because you're saying stuff I don't know about.
But as much as I felt like Terrence Young probably was a bit of a hard ass, even though people always said how much they loved him and everything, both behind the scenes I've seen of these movies, they're like, oh, I love Terrence Young so much, he's so great. But I'm also underneath that, there's a lot of oh my God, this guy's probably kind of a dick too. But as much as he's a dick to everybody else and everything, he did the same thing to his own self, basically, when he came into a scene riding a helicopter and the helicopter fell into the ocean. It it fell into the ocean and he was in it, and people had to go run out there and save him and everything. And he I think he broke his arm, he nearly drowned, all this stuff, and 35 minutes later they're shooting the scene.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just fucking nuts, man.
Yeah.
It's just talk about a different time, and just
sure.
I would have if that had been me, I would have been like, I'm going to need a day.
Yeah, let me recover from
I'm
this.
just
But you know what? The drive to make a movie, under budget and on time and all that, a lot of times that was what rules the day.
And look, directors being shitty to actors and stuff, I'm never gonna say that's okay.
Right.
But I do think directors are kind of like coaches, in a way, or at least like football coaches. I just feel like there almost has to be like an assholishness to you because you've got to be able to control so many people and then have people above you, blaming you for things. So I'm sure there's days where things just get really tense. I still think like the David O. Russell, Lily Tomlin thing, I think that's probably the extreme. And then, but you hear stories about Spielberg where Empire of the Sun, he kept telling that, there's that scene where Christian Bale gets slapped. And he kept telling the actress that was slapping him to just keep slapping harder, and because he wanted Bale to cry. And it's just, you hear stuff like that and you're like, God, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
But I mean, people talk about how much they love to work for Spielberg. So I don't know. It's I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's crazy. It's just, I don't think I could direct a movie.
There's definitely a line. And I think that there's some, who knows, there are probably some directors who can get what they want without that. And there are others who just can't do it. There's just not a, they have to create attention.
Yeah. And I definitely, like I said, I don't think that's okay behavior. It's just, there's so many stories and like you said, people just say they like to work with them. And I guess some of that could be fear of not wanting to alienate themselves from a job, but I don't know. I think people are probably pretty genuine most of the time about stuff like that. A few other things, that chess match that you mentioned, which is God, I mean, I love though that all that money, you see it on the screen.
Yeah.
Cause I mean, that set is so elaborate and it's beautiful, but that was a reenactment of an actual match. I don't know who these people are because I don't follow chess. But
Boris Spassky is one. Yeah.
David Bronstein. I guess all the moves and stuff were just were fabricated after that, which is pretty interesting. The film was over budget, as I already mentioned. It was taking longer than expected, so they were trying to meet that release date. And so Peter Hunt was actually editing it as they were shooting, which I think that does still happen. I think that might happen more. I don't know. I don't know enough about it, but
from what I understand,
at least then I guess it was odd.
Kind of an unsung hero on this movie, the editor, because there were a lot of things they had to do in this. There was one scene, they had already shot it, but they needed to do a reshoot, but they needed to do it without going more over budget. So they had to shoot. It was a scene where they're talking to Blofeld, and it's a lot of Lenya is talking, and they had to shoot her and then superimpose her over a shot that was already made. And they had to make sure that her head didn't move a certain way, or else you'd see the other footage behind it. So it was stuff like that. There's a scene also where she goes to look at the fighting fish, and they reverse it, and it comes back. And it's little things like that. And they also changed a lot of the order of how the script was telling the story so that it would make more sense. So it was a lot of things.
That does make sense. And I can get into that more when I talk about the book, because the order in the movie, the book is very similar. It's probably one of the most faithful adaptations they've done, but the order of things is very different. Well, and then obviously we'll talk about this. We talk about the next segment. We actually talk about what we thought of the movie, but the editing on that fight sequence between Grant and Bond is in a train cab is. Oh, I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
I wish we got more of that
for 3 weeks. They shot that for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just love that. I love the idea of let's pick the smallest room possible where people can't even move that well and have a fight. That's just, I don't know. I just wish more movies did things like that. At least in America. I know there are still a lot of Asian action films, and so in America there's some direct to video ones that there's some directors out there that play around with it a lot more, I know, but I'm just thinking as far as theatrical stuff, you don't see stuff like this rarely. I mean, I guess maybe the Captain America elevator fight, but but the editing in that versus the editing in this is so vastly different.
Right.
And it's not as believable that they're actually in that small of a space, I think. So I don't know. That's just me. That's me saying get off my lawn, I guess. So we get a lot of conventions in this that we're going to see like in almost all the Bond movies that follow. One of which is the credits, the way the credits are done. Now, the credits don't have their own song. They're done to it's the Bond theme. It's John Barry's version of the Bond theme.
Mm-hmm.
But the ladies, there's scantily clad ladies dancing. I really like the credits in this
really
one. How
cool.
they come up like they come up on the legs and stuff of the women and the thighs
they're like
and whatnot.
it's kind of like it's like as if something's projecting onto their bodies, and so you don't see the full name at first, but then certain movements will make it where you can see the full name and everything. It's really cool.
It is cool because Maurice Binder did the credits for Dr. No, and he was brought back, but he had some disagreements, I think, so they let him go. And they brought this guy named Robert Brownjohn, and apparently he's the one that had that idea, and which ended up being a great idea, I guess, because they do it in all the movies that follow pretty much. Even the Craig. There's one exception, which is Die Another Day, because Die Another Day does this weird thing where it actually has part of the narrative is in the credits. Mm-hmm. Like you see like Bond getting tortured and stuff, which obviously we'll talk about in several weeks. But with the exception of that one, I think even in the Craig films, it's like women, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, not always like not always like the risque type of stuff that they were doing, but but usually yes, it's got the same kind of slow motion balletic type of movements and stuff.
Yeah, and I could totally see why some people might consider those credits to be a little raunchy, maybe a little skeezy, but I don't know. I when they're done well like this, I just think they're fun to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not. I mean, it's like, I guess it is real women, but it almost looks like drawings or something.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah. And then the pre-credit sequence, which was something that really started with this movie and becomes pretty popular, at least the way it's done in this movie, because there are several that do this there's a handful that do this where you think for a second maybe Bond has been killed. This was the first one. But originally it was supposed to take place at that training school that we see that Spectre has. But Young had recently watched last night at
Marienbad.
Yeah, which he called pretentious, which I thought was really funny.
Which it is, but by the way, just as an aside, I know this is a Bond podcast. That movie is great. I love it.
It's way up on my list. And that's reminded me of it, thankfully.
Yeah.
I think it's on Criterion Channel, too. I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
Last year at Marienbad. I said last night, but it's last year at Marienbad.
Yeah, it is last year, yeah. But I just thought it was funny, though. He didn't really like it, but he said it was shot so well. So and I guess there's like gardens and stuff that are in that movie, so he decided to do have the opening in the garden with the statues, which I really like. I like the opening, so I think that works.
Yeah.
The only other thing I had, there was a video game made based on this in 2005, which I'm not a gamer, but Spectre was changed to Octopus because the rights over who owned the name Spectre was still in dispute.
That's weird.
That's going to come up in a while, like in a shortly, actually. When we start talking about Thunderball, we can talk about some of that. But out of all the things they could have picked, though, Octopus?
No idea. And apparently Sean Connery did voice work for that, so that was basically his last time doing any kind of Bond work whatsoever. So cool. But we'll probably get into that as well, but but Spectre is bigger in this movie than it is in the book because they didn't want to. They felt like Broccoli and Saltzman were under the impression the Cold War was on the verge of being over, so they didn't want to make SMERSH, the Russian CIA or whatever. They didn't want to make them the main villains. This really comes together pretty well in the movie, by the way. They've done this whole thing. They've set this whole thing up where they're not the true villains and it's Spectre and everything. We'll get into all the plot of it later, but that is an interesting thing that they made Spectre more of a big deal. The other thing about that opening sequence is that the first time they shot it, apparently when they pull the mask off, the person who's playing Bond underneath the mask looks so much like Sean Connery that they had to put a mustache on the next when they, I don't know if they did it digitally or if they shot it again with a guy with a mustache, but they didn't realize this until like
and it was Henry Cavill.
Yeah, it was Henry Cavill. But they didn't realize this until much later, apparently, in the production. And then they're like, "Oh my God, this guy looks too much like Sean Connery. Everybody's going to think that's really Bond or whatever." So they had to reshoot.
That's the stuff I love, though. That's why I like that we do this segment, because it's so interesting to see just all the stuff that goes into doing all this, and then the stuff that happens or the decisions that are made on the fly.
Yeah,
it's just really, it's crazy. So it's up until Thunderball in the books, it's Smersh, which is, from what I can tell, is like 100% like Russian people. Because Blofeld's not in the books yet at this point and all that. But then after, when they wrote the screenplay for Thunderball and Ian Fleming essentially took the screenplay and made it into a novel, then Spectre and Blofeld and people like that start, which that's also what caused the legal issues, was because of that, and that started everything. So yeah, it's Smersh for quite a while, and there's no Blofeld, and it's very different. But like you said, the movies they didn't feel comfortable making the villains specifically Russian, so they did like a kind of a global crime syndicate, so you could just have, even though it just kind of ends up being like a bunch of Italians. I don't know why that's being nice to the. I mean, we're not going to be mean to the Russians. We'll just be mean to the Italians. They don't care.
They don't really say Italy,
no,
though.
They don't.
So that's the point, is that they don't have a country. They're
true.
They're running on their own essentially.
So, yeah. No, that's very true.
Another thing is that Ken Adam is not doing the production design on this one because Stanley Kubrick stole him away to do Dr. Strangelove, which obviously has some of the best sets of all time in it.
Yeah, I read that. I'm glad he went and did that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but Ken Adam will be back. He is a huge part of what you remember about, especially the Connery Bonds. So.
All right, you ready to start just talking about our thoughts?
Yeah, sure.
So let's go ahead to our next segment, which is called A Review to a Kill.
I've got you in my sights.
Get the fuck out of my sight before I demolish you.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
There's no need to shout. I'm not shouting.
Why don't you stop your whining and get on with it? I've heard this shit before.
We are going to give you our thoughts on whatever film we are discussing this week. This week, we are talking about, obviously, From Russia with Love. Chris, what are your, was this, I don't want to keep asking you this because I don't want to, if it's the same story, but is this also one you saw for the first time when you were doing your Bond retrospective?
Yes. My Bond retrospective was back in 2006. So just to sort of a reminder, I did that back in 2006 when Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig, came out. And so, yeah, From Russia with Love was my first viewing of it back then. And back then, I didn't like this very much. And I think it's because I thought the train sequence, which is the main part of this movie, is too long. But on the second viewing of this, I really, really enjoyed this. The only part of the train sequence that I don't like, and I don't know if this is because of budgetary constraints. We don't know, because this movie, it had twice the budget of Dr. No. So they had more room to work with, but that doesn't necessarily mean they had all the money in the world to work with. But this is probably one of the most egregious villains spilling out the plans things I've ever seen in my life. There's no reason for Robert Shaw to tell him the entire plot. Now, I think they're trying to make it seem like, oh, he's just a mercenary, and that, if you just dangle money in front of Grant, he'll just do whatever. He'll change allegiances like that and whatever, which doesn't make sense to me, since he's basically been just like, he's been trained to be a Spectre person the entire time. I didn't know the money
he seems
thing,
like almost like the Terminator or something.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And the money thing is something that kind of comes out of nowhere for me, like it's as a gateway into that whole thing. So yeah, anyway, I'm not a big fan of the fact that he tells every single detail of what's going on. However, everything else on that train is great. The production is way better. I love the opening sequence. I love how they start this off with the chess thing. Look, that movies over the years have overplayed this chess thing with villains. Like, oh, this is a villain that sees 100 moves ahead and so on and so forth. But I think for a movie like this, perfect opening to have somebody who is a chess master basically come in and say, here's the plan. This is what we're going to do. And like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. They want this Lecter thing, that thing that like cracks codes.
Decodes. Yeah.
They want this thing. And there's a whole, I like too the fact that Blofeld does this over the top thing about the fighting fish, and the one fish sits there and waits while the other two, and then when the one that wins is done, the other fish can come in and fight the tired one. He's, Spectre is that fish that's waiting for Russia and Great Britain, or whatever we want to call it, the UK, England. There's a million different ways to call England, and I'm butchering them all. Anyway.
We need to just have Ian on standby for these shows. Just like, hey, man.
There's so many different names for different entities that are over there, and yeah. Anyway, so it's basically pitting them against each other, making it seem like the British are stealing this and whatever, and like so Russia will be mad at them, and then meanwhile, while they're not looking, Spectre can come in and take the Lecter, which was called the Spectre, I think, in the book. Anyway, I love that whole setup there. And if they did indeed change the order of things that were in the screenplay back to where it was, it's perfect to set this whole thing up. They did the editing perfectly in this. So I love how they set this up. I love all this whole thing. Like, they know it's a trap. They know MI6 knows this is a trap right off the bat, but they don't know what they're really looking, why this is a trap, who's behind what.
Yeah, and they think they could still get the machine.
Sure.
Even if it is a trap.
Yeah, and this is it plays exactly like the chess master is saying it will, and it should work, except for the fact that fucking Grant just tells the whole story and doesn't kill Bond when he has a chance. But
it's interesting you mentioned already that Austin Powers, the Kleb character, feels very much like the one in the Austin Powers. I wonder if Grant, like the whole, like, I'm going to give all this exposition before I try to kill you. If that's where, Mike Myers got that from too, because just in the next movie, we're going to have the villain say something like, "Why no, Mr. Bond, I just expect you to die. Like, I'm not going to tell you." And I wonder if that's kind of I've always wondered if that's something like that. They thought that was ridiculous too after the fact, and then we're like, let's make fun of that. I don't know. Maybe that's not true, but
who knows? I mean, that had to have been something that people, if there was one thing that they came out of From Russia with Love saying I didn't like, it might have been that, because you're exactly right. The next one, it's like, nope, not going to tell you anything.
Is the Lecter, would that be, I never get these right, I think. Would the Lecter be a MacGuffin?
Yeah, it's something that we're supposed to worry about that isn't really a big part of the plot. Like, yes, it's a thing that drives the plot, but it's never anything that's in the plot. It's never like, we never see it decode anything or whatever. It's
like the transfer papers in Casablanca.
Yeah. I think it's anything that is mentioned that drives the plot that really isn't part of the plot. That's what it ends up being.
Yeah, it could have been a lot of things, I guess, and it was just what gets them going. Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think this movie, it's one of the best looking Bond movies. Mm-hmm. I think. I mean, it definitely, between it and Dr. No,
leaps and bounds above Dr. No. Yes.
And it's also, like, I was thinking while I was watching this is one of those movies I'd want to show a younger person that talks about, like, how movies look today versus back then. I mean, I was like, watch this and tell me this doesn't look better than some stuff we get today. Mm-hmm. But I know it's on film, and that's a whole different thing. But it just made me think of going and watching Thor: Love and Thunder, like, just a week ago, and just how there's a lot of Thor: Love and Thunder that looks really good. Don't get me wrong, but there's some scenes where, like, I just see the green screen. Like, it's like there's just too much in the background to the point where it's hard to buy. Mm-hmm. And then you go watch, like, something from the 60s or 70s, and you're just like, God damn it.
Yeah.
Like, why can't film still look like this? But once again, old man, get off my lawn. Although this movie is well before me. It's 12 years before I was born or whatever. But yeah, no, I like almost all of it. I will say I hate, and this is in the book too, I kind of hate the whole thing about like the reason she wants to defect, the reason they're giving them that she wants to defect is that she fell in love with Bond looking at a picture of him.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously it's a lie, but like, and that's probably why they also think it's a trap, but it just, I don't know. It's just dumb. Like, I just I don't know. It's never made sense to me. This isn't a movie also. I don't remember watching this one if I saw it when I was a kid, I don't remember. I feel like this is one I came to more as an adult. Mm-hmm. But that's always kind of in the back of my mind, just been like, that's a little silly. Like that, and I think it hurts the Tatiana character too, even though it's a lie, but I still think like you still have to kind of, I don't know, the way she has to play the role after that, I think it kind of affects some of her character, and the strengths that character has kind of get diminished, I guess. But that's just everything I have wrong with this is pretty small. The other sequence I really don't like is about halfway through, and they're at that, like, it's like, I wrote it in my notes as a female fight club.
Oh yeah, exactly, yeah.
They're going and watching these two women fight. That kind of takes you out of the movie because it just goes on for too long. And then on top of that, there's an action scene right after that because the Spectre guys barge in and start shooting, and like that action sequence is kind of terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, and especially when you see like what happens at the end of the movie is so well done, and even at the beginning of the movie, and then you just got this, it like even the people, like the bad guys that are obviously just extras or whatever, they look like they don't even know how to hold a gun. Like it's just a really ridiculous moment in an otherwise
it's ultimately
really good movie.
A little confusing. Maybe you can hash this out for me. It's a little confusing because they go to this he goes to this fight, and it's like, it's like a party basically, so that everybody can see these, and it's the Romani people. We can't, saying the other word. You guys can look it up if you don't know whatever. We're going to choose not to say that word anymore, but
it's like Bond and Karam are just kind of like getting to know each other.
They go and watch this, and then it's the Russians who attack, I think, right? It's the Russians who come in.
It's the Russians.
It's the Russians who come in and attack because they think that Bond has killed one of their agents. That's the big thing. But then at the end of it, I guess the guy could be lying, but at the end of this scene, they're like, oh, we were after Karam Bey the whole time or whatever. They weren't after Bond or whatever. Bond does get saved in this by Grant, who needs Bond to survive so that he can get the machine. But yeah, Spectre does show up in this, so I guess And then after, of course, Bond is offered the two Romani girls to have sex with over the and
that's weird too,
and have them as his servants for a whole night or whatever. He decides, all right, we're going to go to this hideout, which I don't think the movie explains how they know that Russian guy is at that hideout.
No, that confuses me too.
Like they said, we're going to have to.
Was this the periscope?
Yeah, in the periscope, they see the guy. Now maybe they say something about where he's living in there, and I just didn't see it. But maybe they already knew where he was. But as soon as they get there, he knows like. He has a secret way of getting out. He knows it comes out of that the poster that's on. Of course, it's another Broccoli Saltzman movie that's on the on the side of
Call Me Buona or something like that.
Yeah, which, and of course they have to have it come out of the woman's mouth on the poster, the secret way that this Russian guy gets out. But he knows everything about this dude, like knows every single bit of this secret. So I guess, I don't know, like they made it sound like this was going to be a big deal, that they're going to have to find his hideout, but they knew exactly where that guy was, and they knew where he was going to come out.
And then having that weird, and that scene's so weird where he gets the two women, they give him he brings the two women in, and then it also doesn't make sense logistically because what actually happens. I would have just cut that scene out, but I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. May as well just go straight
scene does
to
nothing for the movie. There's nothing
might as
about
well go straight to the action scene. But and then they set it up where Bond has that AR-7 that he's going to shoot the the Russian guy when he comes out, but Kareem Bey decides I'm going to be the one that shoots him, and then he has millions chances to shoot him, he never does, but then finally he gets him. But anyway, yeah, it's just that's a really odd sequence in the middle of the movie for sure.
I do love Kareem Bey. Like if this had been like in today's world where they just gave like side movies to like supporting characters, and I would have loved some Kareem Bey movies.
Mm-hmm.
I think those might have been fun.
Yeah,
poor Pedro.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the other thing about this movie though is it's just like when I think about Bond films, I just don't think about this movie, and it might be the best movie, like as far as like from a filmmaking standpoint, cinematography, all that. Like it might be the best Bond film, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be my favorite. I mean, obviously, I'm coming back to these, so I don't know what my final ranking's going to be. But like at the very least, it's depending on how the Goldfinger viewing goes, which I haven't seen in forever. It's at the very least, it's my first or second favorite Connery, which I don't know. I mean, there's a few bad Connerys we haven't gotten to.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like it isn't like what Bond becomes, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I mean, I think this movie in some ways works because it's not as much like the future recurrence of all these recurring things that happen, even though it does set up some of them here. But it's just one of those weird ones. Like I don't like it's so like I don't even remember like knowing it existed. Like I don't remember this being one they played in Bond marathons on TV and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I was aware of it, but I don't have like a memory attached to it at all. Like I knew Goldfinger and I knew Thunderball and Dr. No, I knew what those movies were, but like for whatever reason, this one just never was really on my radar. But with that being said, I still think it's one of the more entertaining films in the franchise. And it might be like if you were to do a best type of, rating, maybe it is the best. I don't know.
I don't know. It might be. I know that
it's really good.
I know that amongst fans, I think Thunderball tends to get the most praise out of all that, especially out of the Connerys.
It made the most money. I know that.
When I was watching all these movies back in 2006, and I was watching the behind the scenes back then too, but I just remember there being a lot of love for Thunderball, and that was the gold standard. But and I'm going to be revisiting these other Connerys, but I feel like this one's my favorite one. If I'm thinking about the other ones that are coming out later, this is probably my favorite one.
I forgot about Diamonds Are Forever. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so
I remember,
else.
like, as a kid, I remember everybody talking about Goldfinger. Like, Goldfinger was kind of the one that when I was younger, and that's the one I was more drawn to. So it'll be interesting. But I haven't seen that movie in, like, 15 years, so it'll be interesting to see how it holds up. I feel like when I listen to, like, podcasts or read articles on Bond, they're talking about Bond or whatever, I feel like at least in today's climate, like From Russia with Love, it's kind of one of the ones that gets brought up a lot. And I'm kind of glad because I think that it is. I just don't think it's what you're expecting. I will say this. I think it's the closest to what the Daniel Craig films were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like it almost feels like they were kind of going back to more, especially with Casino Royale. Some of the later Craig films, they still have that. They still have the over-the-top villain and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah. But I really like all the performances in this movie. Daniela, I mean, I think she's limited by just the way her character's written.
Yeah.
But I think she comes off really well. Like she lights up the screen. I mean, she's obviously beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I think her and Connery have better chemistry than Connery and Ursula Andress had.
Mm-hmm.
This also might be Connery's best. By the way, I'm almost positive this is Connery's best performance as Bond.
Could be.
I'm almost positive about that, but I could be wrong. But also, like I said, this is when he's really, really into it. Like I read a lot of stuff where he was like actors that would get hired on or actors they were trying to get. He would call them and be like, "No, you need to do this. Like this is going to be big." It's like he was actually trying to help. Get people involved. So I think that probably shows a little bit in his performance because he actually seems to be having fun. And I will say, like, I mean, there's obviously some problematic stuff in this movie. There's going to be problematic stuff in just about every Bond movie, but his character feels a little, I don't know, more professional in this one, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Thunderball, like there's a scene in Thunderball where, like, early on, where I kind of hate Bond for the rest of the movie because of what he does.
Yeah.
And you don't really get any of that. Like he's always very like, I mean, Tatiana's lying, but he doesn't know that. But like, I still feel like he's really good with her. Like he seems pretty respectful about, I don't know, as far as Bond goes. Mm-hmm. So stuff like that. I just think the character's a little different in this movie. That might also be why I don't always think about it, but I do love that. I also, there's another scene I really like. I love the grenade in the helicopter.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
I like that a lot, but I also, Connery makes the weirdest reference after that. He says, "I'd say one of our aircraft is missing." Which
There's
is like this
two really bad, like worse than normal Bond lines in this. That's one of them. I would say that that they would consider one of their aircraft is missing or whatever. And then there's another one. God, what was that one? I've already pushed it out of my head, but there's another one that is just so basic. Like it's just like it kind of reminded me of like in basketball, not basketball, but in Orgasmo, where they're like, that really gave me a boner, if you know what I mean, that type of thing. It's like not really a double entendre, man. It's just,
Oh man,
there's some really bad ones in this.
And I also really like Robert Shaw. I mean, Robert Shaw's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
He's, obviously he's Quentin Jaws, memorable roles in The Sting, Taking a Pelham 1, the original Taking a Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
He unfortunately died way too young. Like, God, I would have loved to have seen what like late 80s and 90s would have done with him. Like he could have had some of those like Dennis Hopper roles and stuff,
Sure.
I don't know.
Such a distinctive voice too, just unmistakable Robert Shaw. Yeah.
Like I'd love to see him like as a villain in like a Schwarzenegger movie or something from the 80s. That would have been awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But he has a line that I really like when and it is in this moment where he's saying all this stupid stuff, but he does say, where did I have that? Oh, he says, "You know which wines to drink with your fish, but it's you who are on your knees." I always thought that was
yeah.
I always thought that was a really cool line.
For me, there was a laugh out loud funny line in there where like where they're listening to the recording of him and Tatiana, and she's throwing himself at him saying like, just make love to me and all that, and he's trying to figure out where the lector is and all this, and she goes, "Do you love me more than all those Western women?" And there's like a whole bunch of people, like M and everybody, are listening to this recording. You can see Lois Maxwell in the back. Moneypenny is just kind of like, "Oh my God, Bond is such a dog," blah, blah, blah. But everybody else is like just listening to this recording. And Tatiana's like, "You like me more than those Western women?" Is like, well, actually, there was this one time me and M had a really interesting situation. And M shuts off the recording. Of course, when he turns it back on, this is kind of ruins it a little bit. He turns it back on. He's already moved on to the next thing. I guess he forwarded it or something, but I love how
that was a good moment.
M shuts it off immediately after that.
Well, I like that. I mean, I think the best Bond movies have that kind of like sense of humor to them too. Like even something as like dark as like Casino Royale, it definitely has some moments of levity and stuff in it. All right, do you have anything more you want to say about me?
No,
I think we covered it. It is really good though. I highly recommend it if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it. I would even say start with this one. I mean, I think I think you absolutely could, and then go back later and watch Dr.
There's not really much other. There's recurring things that they're doing in this one, like you said. The Eunice Grayson character is in this, and she was supposed to be in several movies. The thing with the hat, every time he comes in, he has some new way of. I guess he's always trying to throw the hat onto the.
And for my next trick,
onto the hat rack, and like that becomes a recurring thing, but not really. I mean, you could start with this easily. So
that scene reminded me too, because he does that where he's like, "And for my next trip," and then he closes the door and he sees M is there, so he he stops. And I just thought that was interesting because I think later on, especially, that's a very antagonistic relationship. But early on, I had forgotten that, that's his boss. And like he kind of, I don't know if he fears him, but he definitely has some respect. He realizes that was inappropriate in this, and although I don't know how inappropriate that would have been, but I mean, I guess it was, he was embarrassed or whatever that his boss caught him being silly. Which is, I don't know. I think that's interesting because by the time we get to Brosnan, we're having these like Brosnan and Judi Dench like shouting matches and stuff.
Yeah,
you're a relic of the Cold War. But anyways, so we're gonna do our rankings in a few different categories. I will explain this. So we're now going to rank this film in 5 different categories. Our scale will be based on something Bond holds near and dear to his heart, or as long as they are shaken and not stirred. So for each category, we're ranking from 1 to 5 martinis. 5 being the best damn liquid that has ever passed your lips, and 1 being the well liquor you had to settle for or were too drunk to care that night. So first we'll start just the story, just the overall feeling toward the movie, which sounds like both of us were kind of high on that. So what did you, out of 5, what did you say for that?
I'm going to, for the story itself, I think it's really solid. I'm going to give it 5.
Nice.
I think that's one thing that it does really well. It tells it well. You're never really confused, except that middle section. That might get you down to a 4 in some instances, but I think overall the fact is we know what's going on throughout this. There's no like real that's confusing, like the whole what they're trying to do is not really confusing, and it's really well set up, so I'm going to give it 5.
No, I'm with you. I did take it down to 4 because of that middle section, but I'm probably closer to like a 4.5 though, but like we're not doing that, so sure. I'll just say
can't have half 4. A martini, man.
I mean, I guess you could.
But, you could.
But we'd have to split the glass. It doesn't.
Right. Work. Yeah, exactly. There's no way to pour half liquid.
The performance, which I actually think I talked myself into going higher on this than I already was. Just Connery's performance, the Bond.
Connery's performance as Bond. Yeah, I will give this a 5 as well. I kept thinking during this whole thing like how assured he was and how much fun he seems to be having throughout, and this seems like this is obviously way better than the first one where he's just kind of trying to get into the character and everything, and he's good in that first one, but I think he's totally solid in this.
Well, and I think this one's such a better story, and maybe that is because they realized what they wanted to do after the first one, but this is such a better story that I'm really glad this wasn't the first one because in the book order, this comes right before Dr. No. But I wonder if this would have been as good if they had done this one first, because you would have everybody not really knowing what they wanted to do exactly. And you had not only did you have Connery more comfortable, you had Terrence Young was more comfortable. Yeah. And stuff like that. So. I agree with you. So I gave that a 5. So the villain, or in this case, I guess it's villains and henchmen and women. I thought that whole group was fun. I think there are definitely going to be more memorable villains, although I don't know if there's going to be too many. I mean, sometimes my biggest issue with some of these films is the villain. So, but I did say 4 out of 5 because I had a lot of fun with them.
Yeah, I kind of feel like it's maybe between 3 and a 4, but I'm going to go with 3 only because the promise of what Grant is in this doesn't come out by the end of it. When you think of just unfeeling robot characters or whatever, I was a little disappointing that money drove him so much by the end of it. And he's really good, but like then I mean the Rosa Klebb character has moments. Blofeld is obviously not yet like totally into this yet, but he's behind it, and I really like this Kronstein guy.
Yeah.
But he's not as soon as he makes the plan, he's out, and then they do the surprise kill or whatever. I mean, if you've seen movies now, he's the one that's going to die. But I really like that character, and it was a little upsetting that he's the one who ends up dying. And then I hate that in general, where the maniacal villain has to kill off his henchman just because
I don't
of
understand
some
it.
weird failure or whatever.
I don't understand it.
And I've never understood that. And here's the guy, like, everything worked according to plan except for the fact that Grant fucked it up. And now you're like, I'm gonna kill this main guy who came up with the plan. So there, and he's your smartest guy. So
and that's the other thing. That dude, like, can't you just give him a slap on the wrist? Like, maybe pay him a little less or something? Like, there's got to be something. I just don't know why. Because now you got to go train somebody else.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too.
Sense.
Like you make a big deal about showing them in this training complex and everything, and like they're showing them like this is they're obviously learning how to shoot and
I meant to
aim
mention
and
that.
all this. It was apparently patterned after Spartacus, the one in Spartacus, apparently.
Well, but I thought it was interesting because we start getting that with Q, right? Like when I don't remember the first one they do that, but Bond will go in there. I feel like I remember it more with Roger Moore. They might have done some with Connery, but Bond will go in there and there'll just be people in the background, like testing stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So.
yeah, exactly, and it's a sort of a thing they make fun of in Wayne's World, where Wayne goes into the little room at the diner or whatever, and there's like all these people training and helicopters and people going down and stuff. And
did you
I've always
understand?
I've always wanted to walk into a room where a whole bunch of people are training to do stuff.
Did you understand though the Spartacus thing? I hadn't seen Spartacus in so long.
No, not really, but I'm assuming that there was some sort of, like overhead shot of people training and stuff like we've seen in so many movies before.
Well, then I forgot to mention the helicopter. Well, I read somewhere where the helicopter or the plane scene was North by Northwest.
Yeah.
But then Terrence Young in the book, he goes out of his way to be like, I was not copying Hitchcock. I don't even like Hitchcock very much. I was like, well, maybe you weren't, but somebody was.
First off, nobody said you're copying Hitchcock, asshole. They're saying you're paying homage to it, and it's pretty clear the way that whole scene plays out. It's like North by Northwest, whether you saw that movie or not, or whether you were patterning yourself after that movie or not. That's what everybody's going to be thinking, especially considering there's the shot of Sean Connery running towards the screen and the helicopter's coming right towards him. Apparently, he's doing a lot of his own stunts in that shot too, by the way, and got close to actually hurting him a couple of times shooting.
Yeah, him and Shaw both. So our next thing we rank the gadgets, the gizmos. Now the only thing I really saw was that multi-purpose, the briefcase, right? Was that?
Yeah, there's that, and it has multiple functions where they have the gold whatever it is. I don't remember what it's like some sort of currency that they have in there, and there's the way the briefcase is open, one way the smoke doesn't happen, and one way the smoke happens. So there's that, and then there is apparently something that's actually patterned after a real thing that Russian agents used, which is this is not a Q thing, but the knife that comes out of the boot, and you hit them, and there's a poison that is applied, and of course they kill that Kronstein guy, and it's like it took 12 seconds. Hopefully they'll find a faster acting poison at some point. But that's the only thing that I remember. After that it's the gun. Like they gave him the AR-7. Which is something that he has to assemble later on, but it's nothing involving with cars or anything like that. It's all that briefcase, I believe, is pretty much it.
Yeah, so this would be like probably like a 2.5. So I gave it 3.
Yeah, it's a 3, I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean, good. It's something that all Bond movies kind of do this. They find ways to make that. You have to. It's a Chekhov's type of thing, right? They always show this, and there's always some situation where he can use it. And in this case, it's like, oh, so Grant really does like money, huh? You can get him to open up the suitcase and he'll have the smoke bomb, and then the smoke bomb actually doesn't end up doing much in the end, right? Like,
No.
like it doesn't really do much to the fight because they end up having a marathon fight even after the smoke gets in his face. For some reason, and this is something I guess I forgot during the movie, was I thought that smoke was like supposed to be some sort of poison gas that knocks you out or something. And then I was sitting there going, well, it can't be a poison gas, right? Because Bond is right there in the room. So they just made it a typical smoke bomb. And I'm like, okay, all right, well, there you go.
And then the last thing is the Bond song. Now, we do get our first official song. It is played over the closing. I think it's played in the movie proper, but it's also played over the closing credits. Song called "From Russia with Love." It does absolutely nothing for me.
Me
I don't
either.
I guess I don't hate it, but like it's just a song I listen to, and I don't think I listen to it that often because if it's on the closing credits, I'll just stop the movie. So, but the opening.
It's an odd thing, by the way, too. The way that, like, they obviously didn't know because credits are different from what they are today. They didn't know exactly what to do because they wanted to play a full like verse of that song, but they had run out of credits by the time it got done. And so there's this whole section after the credits where the song just keeps playing and there's nothing going on except you see a backdrop of I think it's in Greece or whatever where they're at the time. And it just sits there forever while they get to let's find a good stopping point for this. We don't want to cut the song off or whatever.
Can you imagine like just sitting in a theater like just watching that picture of Greece?
Right.
I got to hear this song, but I give the song 2 out of 5. I don't like the song.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it either. It's not very memorable. So
what
I would give it.
Were you at 2 as well?
I would be a 2.
Yeah.
It's not a 1 because a 1 would be because you ear damage or something. I guess is where I would put 1.
I don't know. So, that's interesting. Will there be a 1? I don't know. I
doubt it.
I don't think so. There'll be quite a few 2s, but
yes, there will be some 2s.
But next week we get Shirley Bassey, our first Shirley. So that's
Die Another Day might be in the running for a 1.
Oh my god, is that Cheryl? No, that's Madonna.
It's Madonna.
Yeah, that's bad.
It's in the running. It's in the running. I'm not saying it is a 1,
but you're not wrong.
When we get to Die Another Day, yeah.
No, because I had completely forgotten about that song because I haven't rewatched the Brosnan ones very much at all. So I always forget what song's on which or who even did a song. But when Ian and I send Die Another Day, that came on. I was like, oh my God, I totally forgot this existed. This is like just, it's so
awful.
bad. So bad. All right. So that's our rankings and our just kind of overall review of the film. Like we both liked it a lot. So once again, high recommend if for some reason you're listening to this and haven't seen it yet. So all right. So our final segment is where we get into talking about. I read the book. I've been reading these books as we're watching the movies, and just talk about a little bit about the differences and stuff. And that is in a segment we like to call "The Spy Who Reads Me."
Reading is one of my very favorite things to do.
Whoa! I'm not reading that crap. Summarize it in one word.
Now you want to talk about reading? Let's talk about reading.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
Cinemasins might have taught you that the book doesn't matter, but for this segment, we're willing to concede at least kind of does. I'm going to give you the nitty-gritty on what is similar to what you saw on the screen, what is different, and there will be plenty of what the hell was Ian Fleming smoking when he wrote this. So this book, I actually don't have a ton to talk about really, because I'll be honest, like this book, it's very similar. Like they obviously we've already mentioned although they do mention Smersh. They do mention Smersh because I think it's Kleb. Either she says I left Smersh or somebody's talking about her. I can't remember now. I didn't write it down, but I do know that, and I did not remember that from my past viewings. But I had not read the books at that time, so I might not have even known that Smersh was a thing. So I probably wasn't paying attention to it. So, but this is the 5th novel. This is the one that came out right before Dr. No, which is interesting because at the end of the movie, he's fighting Kleb and she's got the knife with the poison. In the book, it's the same thing, but she actually poisons him. So it's a cliffhanger at the end of the first book. I'm really glad they didn't do that here, though. I have to say, I'm glad they didn't do it in the movie. But when you read Dr. No, all it says is that Bond has been recovering for the last 2 months. Like they don't explain how he's saved. Or like how he beat the poison that only takes 12 seconds.
He's Bond, man. Well, it's like this is way off topic, and I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
But in the book Misery, where Annie Wilkes is telling him that she wants another one of these Paul Sheldon novels or whatever it is, and he killed off the character in the last book. And then he starts reading that there was because he gets stung by bees, I think is the way he dies. Like he finds out that there's some sort of bee toxin that makes it look like that makes it seem like you're dead.
So
you're really asleep.
I forgot about this.
But you're asleep the whole time. So that's how he ends up writing a new book
oh my God.
for Annie and that whole thing. So anyway.
Oh my God. I've totally forgot about that in the book. But yeah. So the novel, what's interesting about the novel though, is where things happen is very different, because we don't even Bond is not even in the book. It's page 72 of the paperback. If you've got that, I don't know what it is on Kindle and stuff, but Bond is not mentioned until page 72. He's mentioned, but he didn't come up till then. The first 6 or 7 chapters is just mainly it's just part of it is Smurfs trying to figure out who because the whole thing is they want to assassinate somebody it's gonna, and they do this in the movie too. That's why they want to assassinate Bond, but. They have this whole section where they're talking about maybe they should kill M, and then they just decide not to do that. But that's 3 or 4 pages. It just there's all this kind of stuff, and then the first chapter is Grant getting a massage. The entire first chapter is that massage scene that's maybe 10 seconds, in the movie or whatever, is an entire chapter, and it's also a little creepy, But Grant is set up a lot for the first part of the book. They really kind of set up his character, where he's from, and talks about his childhood. And it's almost like even those serial killer novels, I don't think were being written yet. I guess maybe the psychology could have been out there in some form or fashion. But the Grant character kind of sounds like somebody who's going to become a serial killer. They talk about how when he was a child, he killed animals. And then eventually that turned into he was killing, which I think they say women of the night or whatever. So he's killing prostitutes and stuff like that. And realized that he really enjoyed killing. And then so he just got good enough at it that they wanted to do that. And speaking of the serial killer angle, when the police actually catch on that there's somebody killing all these women, they even label him. They give him a name, the Moon Killer. So it's even a serial killer kind of name. So you get to read about that for a couple chapters.
Okay.
And then, like I said, they're trying to figure out a person to assassinate because they want to get back in the quote unquote win column.
Okay.
So they decide to go after Bond. They also mention Bond causing them issues by taking out 2 of their top agents, which one of those is Le Sheriff, which is the villain in Casino Royale. And then Kananga or / Mr. Big, because Live and Let Die is the second novel. We'll talk about Kananga quite a bit here in a few weeks. There's also this really weird bit where there's 3 or 4 paragraphs of the Smurf agents kicking themselves for not thinking of Bond earlier. They're all apologizing to each other. How could I forget Bond? And it's why is this being written? I don't understand this book. And people love this book, by the way. I was reading a lot where this is the best of the books and blah, blah, blah. Because whereas the movie For Much With Love is better than Dr. No, I would definitely take the Dr. No book over this. And I've read Casino Royale. I would take that over this too. This book's just just not a lot goes on for the first half of the book. I think it's 190 pages, and it was probably page 100 by the time things started getting set in motion. The character of Rosa Klebb is a little different. She's described typical Ian Fleming, the way he talks about women. She's described as very I think she's supposed to be really big, but she's also supposed to be really short. So she's kind of I don't know. He almost describes her like she's a weeble wobble or something.
Okay.
Like there's this one thing where Kronstein is sitting next to her, and you like hear his thought. You're reading his thoughts, and he says, "The devil knows," thought Kronstein, "what her breasts were like, but the bulge of uniform that rested on the tabletop looked like a badly packed sandbag, and in general, her figure with its big pear-shaped hips could only be likened to a cello." So, and then also she's like a sexual predator. Well, not like she's kind of a predator because when she meets up with Tatiana, which there's a scene in the movie where she meets up with Tatiana and going over everything.
Very subtle, yeah.
Yeah, but in the book, I mean, it's full on. Like she like leaves the room for a second and she comes back in like a negligee, and then she turns the lights off and she's like, "Here, come sit on the couch by me," you know. And then I think Tatiana just kind of runs away, and then they never mention it again. But it was, I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, I'm not like I've read a lot of older novels, but I don't know how many novels I've read from the 50s and 60s. But like, I feel like the serial killer stuff seems like kind of advanced. Like it's something that more books would do later, but really weren't doing at the time. And then definitely that scene with Cleb and Tatiana just seemed more like something you would read like a couple decades later, you know. So that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
When we get to Bond, he's very much like, do you remember like Captain Kirk at the beginning of Star Trek Beyond, where he's just kind of like, he's just bored and pissed off because nothing exciting's happening? That's exactly how Bond is. He's just kind of like, there hasn't been anybody to go kill or there hadn't been any adventures to go on, which also makes the whole like the cipher machine thing so much more convenient, because if he had just been on a mission, they wouldn't have been able to get him, you know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and it does make sense, like why he's so keen on getting into this particular mission in the movie.
Exactly.
You know, and that would have been kind of cool to explore. But again, we're talking about a movie that obviously, even though it had a bigger budget, it didn't have a great budget to really just explore a lot of different things. So would have been nice though to see a little bit more motivation out of why he wanted to take this one so much. Although I guess he sees the picture of Tatiana and that's what really sets it in motion. And so that's, you know, I mean, that's basically what the movie's saying. He's just a horn dog. So anyway.
Yeah. It's like, I'll take a chance on this being a trap. I don't care.
Sure, exactly.
So much like I talked about with the Dr. No book, there's a lot more with Bond and like Quarrel and Athens in the movie. There's also a lot more in this book with Bond and Kareem than there is in the movie. Although I think they do agree. I think it's perfect what they do in the movie, but there's just like, you know, there's just a lot of them when they first meet, they're just getting to know each other and talking. But it also, much like in the book Dr. No, it makes Kareem's eventual death, just like it did Quarrel's, a little more sad, and it like affects Bond more than it does in the movies, which I get why they can't, you know, just keep that attention on that in the movie. I totally get it, but
right.
But so that's kind of fun. There's still the female Fight Club, which is I'm calling it.
Yep.
I had forgotten that was in the movie. So when I read the book before I rewatched the movie, and when I was reading that, I was like, well, this is something different. And then I was like, oh crap, it's in the movie. I didn't remember that.
And those two women were also, they always scouted the beauty pageants, didn't they? They got two beauty queens there. One was from Jamaica who I think also was supposed to be like tried out for Dr. No because that movie set there. And then there was another one who was another beauty contestant or whatever, and was actually the roommate of Daniela Bianchi during the Miss Universe. I read that. Something like that. She's in that too. But anyway, neither here nor there. Female Fight Club.
No,
yes.
Yeah, it's just a weird scene in the book, and they could have just left it out of the movie. It wouldn't have been a big deal. Bond and Tatiana, when they first meet, I thought it was interesting. That's almost word for word in the book. The scene is a little longer in the book. He's not as quick to just start kissing her and stuff. Like there's a little more foreplay or whatever before they, you know, get involved. Verbal foreplay, I guess. But I thought it was even interesting. They even did the black ribbon around her neck and the stockings, which is focused on a lot in that scene in the book. So I was just like, God, they went ahead and did that. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
There's also, there's an interesting moment. I thought, like I said, Bond seems a little more sympathetic in the books than he does in the movies so far, because there's a moment where when the people try to kill him, the Russians try to kill him during that at the female fight club thing. And then they get away in the book, and they kind of like Bond and Kareem, and they regroup at one point, and so they can surprise the attackers when they come after them. And there's what is it? Did he actually kill one of them? I can't remember. Oh, and then Bond has to kill one of the guys, and he actually makes a comment about killing in cold blood. He says it's something he's never done, and he actually feels remorse for it. It's really interesting because I guess he just means like he's only killed people he's been assigned to kill, and he's never just killed like intentionally killed somebody.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. I kind of like that aspect in the books. But I once again, that's harder to portray in a movie, and I know they can't. Things have to be cut for movie reasons, and I totally get it. But it's just it's just interesting to me. And then I already mentioned Bond is poisoned by Kleb at the end of Dr. No. I mean, at the end of Dr. No, Kleb poisons him. I mean, the end of From Russia with Love, sorry, Kleb poisons him, and then at the beginning of Dr. No, it's when you find out he got the B serum or whatever it was.
Yeah, and the B serum, yes, indeed.
So that's all I have to say about the book. Like I said, the book was pretty much. I mean, the movie doesn't really take away from, but like another thing, like the way it's structured differently. That chess scene comes like in the middle of the book. And I love that they moved that because I think that works really well because they have to set up, they just have to set up the villains in a way that they wouldn't have been able to do if they did it exactly the way the book did it. Or we just wouldn't meet them for like 45 minutes, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, but yeah, no, that's, I thought it was fine. Read. I don't think I like it as much as most people seem to. I was honestly bored, which I don't typically get that bored reading. So that's kind of a shocker for me. So, but anyways, so I guess that's it for this week.
All right.
Thank you guys for joining us and listening to us and all that fun stuff. And if you would like to get in touch with us, you can reach us a few different ways. You can email us at golddiamonddeath007@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at goldspy007. And if you really like the podcast, we would appreciate it if you gave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast service you use. We hope you will come back next week. We will be talking about Goldfinger.
Yeah, Goldfinger.
Yeah, I don't know why.
He's the man. Yes.
I didn't do the tune right at all. That was terrible. Well, just pay attention to what Chris said.
That's correct.
But until then, keep the martinis dry and shaken, the Baccarat shoe moving, and the Aston Martin fully gassed. This is Chris Atkinson and Jonathan Watkins signing off, and we'll see you next mission. And I've weirdly seen all of his films except for one, I think. I haven't seen 31.
I definitely have not seen most of his movies at this point.
But yeah, because I've seen both Halloweens that he did. I've seen Devil's Rejects, 1,000 Corpses, and 3 from Hell. And I've seen the Lords of Salem, which that's the one that most people are like, that or Devil's Rejects are the ones that people are like, well, that's actually really good. I disagree. Although Lords of Salem might be his best by default, but it's still not very good. I do have an autograph from him, though, because, I didn't meet him, but if you bought the Lords of Salem book that he also wrote, they sent you like a card with his autograph on it that you could put in there, and somebody got that for me.
I have seen House of 1,000 Corpses, which is more notable for the fact that I saw trailers for it for like 3 years, I believe.
Oh yeah, it took forever.
The Devil's Rejects, which I still don't understand why people love, and then the 2 Halloween movies, and I haven't seen anything beyond that.
I will tell you, the Devil's Rejects, I know when I saw it, when it came out, I thought it was okay, but I think a lot of that had to do with it was so much better than House of 1,000 Corpses, in my opinion, and I think maybe that's what a lot of people took from it.
We'll say
and then
this.
I rewatched.
Go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say I rewatched it because I went to the Fathom events for some reason. I don't remember why I wanted to do this, but they were showing that, and then they were showing then they were premiering 3 from Hell. And Devil's Rejects is pretty good for like the first half, but then it just, because I'm sitting there, I was watching it going, well, this isn't bad. Like, no, this is okay. And then it gets to, I think it's where they start, like, they hold those people hostage in the hotel, if you remember that, the motel.
Mm-hmm.
And from there on, it's just, it's crap. It's so bad.
I will say that this movie was a part of that long marathon in 2005. There was,
oh yeah,
it was The Island, it was Bad News Bears, that movie, and Hustle and Flow. I watched them all in one night. So there is a possibility that I was too tired to enjoy anything of Devil's Rejects.
I can't. I think you've really got to be into his aesthetic though to like that movie, and like I'm not. So.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just did the same thing in Halloween. I read somebody was talking about Halloween the other day, and they said something like they kind of dug the first half because he was doing his own thing with it. He wasn't just remaking it. But then that second half, or like the last like 30 or 40 minutes, is like John Carpenter's Halloween. You know, he's just remaking it all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Because he spent so much time on young Michael, but I don't know if I would have liked that any better, but that was an interesting point to make where it gets it seems bizarre. And then he even makes them brother and sister still, which doesn't make any sense in the context of that movie. So I don't know. I don't get it, but you know, I'm glad he has fans. I was very excited when I heard about A Thousand Corpses because I liked his music and I knew he was a big horror movie fan. And I was like, well, that could translate. That was before I realized typically the fans are the ones that aren't as good at making the movies. And I don't know why that is. Because like Wes Craven's not a horror fan really at all. John Carpenter is not even really a horror fan. Like he was into Westerns and action movies and like war movies and stuff and science fiction. I don't know about Tobe Hooper, but I feel like from what I don't think he was really into horror either. I think him and Romero are kind of
they can see,
I don't know if you'd say political.
They can see the, I think they can see the other angles beyond it. Fans tend to focus on, this is why copies of movies that come out after big huge hits are never good.
Oh yeah,
fans of a particular genre have a thing that they like about they can point to like some people are like, I love the gore, so that's what they make. They make a gory movie. And there's like no setup to it. People got to realize, just like telling jokes, like when you make any kind of art, you have to build things up. You have to build it up. You have to pay it off. You have to do all that stuff. Yeah. And a lot of times, like if something people try to copy something that was good, or they try to copy things that they like. That's what ends up happening, is that they don't make they don't do their own legwork to make those earned. So that's what happens. And that's why you had that's why, if that was really true, that Craven and Carpenter and Tobe Hooper and all these people weren't really big horror fans, that meant they were trying to do their own thing and we're not trying to emulate others.
Yeah. No, they weren't. And then their initial successes were horror movies. So that's kind of what they ended up having to stick with, even though they tried. I mean, Carpenter, that's the thing about Carpenter. Like, he's considered a horror director, but like at least half of his filmography is not horror. Wes Craven pretty much is. He's got a couple, but
he's got that bullshit movie with Meryl Streep.
Yeah, it was based on that. I don't remember if that movie's called Music of Chance or if that was the documentary.
Yeah, was it Music of the Heart? Was it called?
I think that's right, because that's based on because there was a documentary about that teacher that Meryl Streep plays, and I don't remember what the story is. I've actually never seen the movie.
I haven't either.
It didn't interest me. Oh, it was Columbine that delayed Scream 3, because Scream 3 was supposed to come out, I think, in 99, or maybe it was 98, and then Columbine they had to change everything.
Well, they also, there's
Some school shooting.
In Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, there's all this, Wes Craven is shooting a Scream movie in that, and I'm trying to figure out that was obviously after Scream 3 came out. I'm trying to remember if I'm trying to remember if they're saying it's Scream 4 in that movie or if they're saying that Scream 3. I don't know.
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
But Scream 3 was supposed to take place in Woodsboro, and it was supposed to be high school kids again, and then Columbine happened, and it was like, oh, we're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the Stab 3 thing was still in that storyline. They were filming Stab 3 in Woodsboro because the movie is called Return to Woodsboro.
Mm-hmm.
The Stab 3 is called that.
Mm-hmm.
So you'd still have like probably all those characters, and Roman might have even still been one of the killers. I can't remember, but I know it was supposed to be like a cult, and the cult was led by Matthew Lillard. Like you find out Stu's still alive, which they kind of teased in the last Scream with those the internet stuff. Like off to the side, it said, "Is Stu Macher still alive?"
Yeah.
So I still can't believe they would bring that back since that's pretty well known. That was the idea. I don't know why they would. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Have you seen The Final Girls with Malin Ackerman? And
Mm-mm.
that's a movie that's like basically it's kind of like it's making fun of slasher movies, but it's Malin Ackerman plays this actress that gets killed in a car wreck with her daughter. Her daughter's played by is it Thaisa Farmiga, the younger one, the sister?
Yeah.
And but her mother, Malin Ackerman, she was in these two like pretty popular like Friday the 13th type movies, and so they're having like a reunion, like they're having a 20th year screening or something, and they get her to go. They get Thaisa Farmiga to go to like because they thought that'd be cool to have her, the daughter of this person. And then I can't remember what, like there's a fire or something, and then her and her friends like end up in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just it's like people from like the 2000s like trying to survive and understand an 80s slasher movie, and it's actually it's really well done, and it's really it actually gets really touching because she also gets to interact with her mom, but it's her mom's character in the movie. So it's just I don't know, it's
interesting.
Yeah, it's I'd recommend it. I think it's probably pretty easy to find. I don't remember when it came out.
You brought up Friday the 13th, and it's like that remake that came out. I couldn't help but think of that sex scene that's in that movie because it's the weirdest thing. Like, first off, look, I love Juliana Gill, and I'm happy she did that scene, but it's so bad. That scene is so bad. Like,
it feels super sleazy.
It's really sleazy. Like, it's like, why did she agree to have sex with this dude? Like, I'm like, there's no chemistry between the two. And everything he says, she's like, kind of like, yeah, whatever, man. Like, let's get on with this, and he's like, you've got perfect nipple placement, baby. And I'm like, what the fuck is this scene?
I wonder if that's in the script. I never have looked that up.
Oh my God, dude. That's something we do need to look up because it feels like the director just basically said, just be a fucking horn dog, be a sleaze ass the whole time.
And I've never seen the director's cut, but apparently that scene's even longer.
Really?
Which I'm like,
I can't even imagine that going longer.
Well, that's like, there's a sex scene in part 5 that is like really quick. Like, it's super quick. Mm-hmm. But apparently the guy, because Danny Steinman directed part 5, and he was a porn director before that. Mm-hmm. And so he directed it was like a 6 or 7 minute sex scene.
Jeez.
Yeah. I don't think they were really having sex. I don't know. Maybe they were. I doubt it though, because it was a Paramount, picture film. But then it got cut to because the MPA was so hard on the Friday the 13th movies and any horror movies at that time. Mm-hmm. So it gets cut to 30 seconds. And the actor that plays the dude, he was on one of those. He was on the Crystal Lake Memories documentary, and he's like, that was really unfortunate to see my character, because he said it changed it to where it looked like his character only lasted 30 seconds.
Yeah.
He's like, my friends let me have it for quite a while.
I imagine so. As well they should.